Hi, I'm Joe Gallagher from Veritas Education, and this is Troubleshooting Methods and Tools. In this lesson, we'll take a high-level look at the overall troubleshooting methodology for NetBackup. We'll talk about different points of information gathering, where you can collect information from NetBackup to assist you in your troubleshooting, and we'll talk about some additional resources that are available to help troubleshoot NetBackup. We'll begin with troubleshooting situations and methodology. This slide presents an overview of different scenarios that might require troubleshooting. We can broadly categorize these as being issues that are related to net backup functionality. In other words, are my backups running? Are they running at all? If they are running, are they running according to the desired schedule? What is my overall backup success rate? Am I having problems with backups functioning, or am I having problems with restores where the backup seems to work okay, but I'm unable to recover the data? Another category, and again a broad category we can use for troubleshooting, is environmental issues. This means that there's something that's impacting my backups or restores, but I suspect that it's not necessarily within NetBackup. It's not my backup policy configuration or my storage units or something like that. It's something outside of NetBackup. Primarily communication is what we often look at here, name resolution or connectivity between hosts or other network-related issue or a common environmental issue, although not necessarily the only one. Or finally, I might be doing some performance troubleshooting, meaning that my backups are running, I'm just not happy with the performance I'm getting, and I want to be able to see if there's anything I can do to optimize the data flow to be able to complete backups within their window. This slide shows the high-level approach I take to troubleshooting, and it's an approach that's similar to the scientific method. I begin with investigation, where I have a clear statement of what my problem is, and I collect as much information as possible about it, so I can describe in as much detail as possible what the problem is and what situations cause the problem to happen. That's crucial information for Veritas support in assisting me with issues. It's also pretty crucial information if I'm doing my own troubleshooting. I really need to understand the scope of the problem before I can proceed further. And then once I've done that, I can move on to the analysis phase where I form a hypothesis, where I say, based on the information I've collected, this is what I think is the problem, and maybe more than one possible problem. So I'm going to make kind of a list, and I'm going to prioritize that list based on the most likely candidates. This is what's most likely to be the problem, although it also could be this or this or that. And how can I test it? What I want to do is a process similar to a medical diagnosis, where I rule out particular things as to whether they're the problem or not. So starting at the top of my list, I devise a scenario that says, all right, I think the problem is my tape drive is failing, and so to test this, I'll back up to a different tape drive or to a disk. Something that will rule out, is this the smoking gun, yes or no? And then I test my hypothesis, and if it turns out I've found the problem, great. If not, well, then cross that off the list and move on down to the next item. And in many situations, this will be an iterative process where it takes a couple cycles of investigation before I really narrow in on what my cause is. Once I have definitively identified what the cause is, the implementation phase is where I fix it. And I'm looking for either a workaround or a permanent solution. Here's a look at each one of those steps in a little more detail. Beginning with investigation, again, we have a clearly defined problem statement that kicks off the problem. And then we're going through doing information collection. We're trying to get as much information as we can about the issue. Now, there are places within NetBackup where we can collect information. There are places outside of NetBackup, operating system tools such as logs, system monitors, and core dumps, which might give me additional information. And I also want to kind of be looking for the scenario that causes this problem. In other words, which clients are affected and what do they have in common? Are they all the same operating system or all part of the same network segment? Are they all running the same version of a particular application? And has anything changed? Is this the kind of situation where everything used to work okay and now all of a sudden they don't? Well, what's different? What modifications might have been made recently that's now causing this issue? A little more detail about the analysis step, and this is largely a brainstorming process. Again, I'm kind of trying to come up with as many different reasons for this problem as possible, and I'm trying to make a prioritized list, in order of what is most likely to be the issue. And then I'm going to try to devise different testing scenarios. What can I use to rule out a particular reason as being the actual cause or not? And then let's get testing. Again, start at the top of the list with the most likely reason, see if I can rule it out. If I can, move on down to the next one until I find the real issue. Final stage is implementation, where I pretty much know what the problem is and I just want to get it fixed. And so I want to try to find something ideally that will permanently resolve the problem in the fastest, least disruptive, and cheapest manner possible. And then I'm going to have to go through and verify things, make sure that this actually is a permanent fix and not just a band-aid that's going to cause further problems down the line. Now, the reality is final resolutions may not be immediately available for the problem once I've discovered what it is. So I may find myself making a decision, between waiting for a full resolution or adopting a temporary workaround. And as we can see on the slide, the resolution is what's going to fix the problem. Hopefully forever. It's the definitive fix. And although it's going to completely solve the problem, it may take a while, it may be expensive, or both. And so it may be desirable to do a short-term workaround. What will get me up and running and back in the backup business? And I'll do this for a while, and then I'll come back at a later time when I have more time or money or whatever resources I'm lacking and really implement a permanent solution a little later on. In many cases, when you have serious issues, you're going to be working with NetBackup support to help you get back on track again. These next few slides discuss information that's very important to have on hand when working with our support team. Right off the bat during the investigation, we want to be able to talk to the support engineer with as much information on hand as possible. What specifically is failing? And which particular subsystem does the failure exist in? What part of the process seems to be broken? And what's my history here? Again, is this something that used to work fine and now all of a sudden it doesn't? Or is this something that has never really worked very well for me? And what can we do to isolate this issue? Again, is there particular clients that are being affected, a particular network segment, particular operating system, a particular application that we're protecting? What kind of software, firmware, and hardware version do we have in my environment? And what's the situation where we see this error? Is it easily repeatable, or is it one of these intermittent kind of things? And what is the exact effect that it has? Presumably it's at the very least causing failed backup jobs. And are there any situations where similar activities on other clients happen successfully? Or is it something that where an activity happens at different times? Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't based on the time of day. All of this information is extremely valuable for our support team in helping you diagnose your problem. When working with NetBackup support during the analysis phase, when we're trying to develop a good list of possible causes, it's important to prioritize them in the correct order as to what is most likely and what is not, and your knowledge of your own environment will be invaluable in helping the support engineer help you to prioritize the possible issues. Support engineers should be able to assist in providing insight into the plausibility of many of these causes that you might suggest. When you're working with a support engineer, be sure to communicate which of these causes can be further tested for plausibility on your systems. Can testing be performed on non-production systems, such as a QA environment? That's desirable to avoid impacting the rest of the operation. If not, are there limits to when testing can be performed? Do you have any backups that are available in case any testing process does not go as expected or in case any unforeseen results take place? It's always good to have a known good state that we can fall back to just in case our efforts to correct the problem actually, wind up making it a little bit worse. Once we've worked out the cause, our next step is to implement a fix. Now, oftentimes verifying the problem involves changes that will wind up fixing the problem itself, but sometimes testing simply verifies that the problem exists, but there's still going to be additional steps that are required to really repair it. If the problem is found to be due to a bug with the NetBackup software itself, our fix may involve getting software from Veritas, such as an Emergency Engineering Binary, or EEB, which will be supplied by NetBackup support in those instances where they're needed. Now, implementing the fix and verifying it are two different steps. If I don't have a QA environment or a test suite or time to test other net backup functionality, I can't really be sure that the fix that has been applied hasn't inadvertently broken other functionality. So try to ensure that other functionality has not suffered in response to any changes we've made to the system. This additional testing is very important before completely closing your support case. Always make sure to document all steps taken and to record your support case number in case further details later emerge or as there is some suspected relationship between fixing one problem and encountering a new one. Let's discuss gathering symptoms and information. The first place we're probably going to look when we're collecting information about our issue is within NetBackup itself. The NetBackup Administration Console is probably the first place we'll look. The bar console also will be appropriate, particularly for restore-related issues. NetBackup Op Center, if you're using that in your environment, can be used to run reports that can collect additional information that may be helpful for troubleshooting. Also, there may be commands that you can run in NetBackup, and some of the NetBackup CLIs will return more information or more detailed information than is available in the console. This slide shows some examples of some of the key locations within NetBackup to gather troubleshooting information. We're going to take a look at these in a little bit of detail in the following slides. The very first place we'll probably consult is NetBackup Admin Console, and within the console, the Activity Monitor. Here's our record of job activity of the past 72 hours by default, and access to detailed information about those jobs. This is the part of the administration console in general we probably spend the most time looking at, and certainly for beginning the troubleshooting process, almost always the first place we'll start. By double-clicking a particular job in the Activity Monitor, I can bring up the job details and get a wealth of information about this job, who was being backed up and which server was doing it, which device was being used. Clicking on the Detailed Status tab gives me kind of a mini log file summary of events that happened during this backup. This is information that's drawn from multiple different sources within the NetBackup catalogs, and the idea is kind of to hit the high points during the backup. So even in a successful backup job, there'll be quite a bit of information here about the routine events that happened during the backup. In the case of a failed backup job, there'll be at least a line or two that describes the failure. Sometimes that's very helpful and points us right towards what the problem is. Sometimes it's kind of a generic error, where we know there's an issue, but we don't know that much about it. It's always worth consulting the troubleshooter. The troubleshooter looks up the exit code in the NetBackup help system and gives us information about what typically causes that error and some suggestions for workaround. The information in a troubleshooter is typically the same as what we'd see in the NetBackup status codes reference guide, although it is always worth consulting that guide separately. Sometimes you will see a little bit more detail in the PDF guide that you can download from support than you see from within the help system itself. And then just for completeness, they're showing us here the job hierarchy, the last tab here, which is primarily useful in determining whether I'm looking at a parent job or a child job. The important thing to remember here for troubleshooting purposes, parent jobs kick off child jobs and kind of monitor them to make sure they complete successfully, but they do not move any data. Parent jobs are essentially babysitters. And so when I'm looking for real problems that have caused jobs to fail, I will generally see better information in the child jobs than I will in the parent jobs. I should look at both, but remember the child jobs represent the actual data movement. The activity monitor also shows me the exit code for the job. Remember that status code 0 is the only code which indicates complete success. It worked. Everything was backed up and everything is restorable. Anything other than 0 represents at least a potential problem. Now I say a potential problem because you'll notice the next item on the list here is the status code 1, partially successful backup. Some of what we asked for was backed up and some was not. And these require investigation. What specifically was not backed up. The details in the activity monitor will show me which files were not protected, usually because they're busy files that are locked by an application or by the operating system. If this happens on a regular basis, and it often does, especially in Windows environments, I want to be following up on it and saying, what is this stuff that's not getting backed up? And do I care Is this important, application data files, or is this temporary internet cache, blah, blah, blah? Because if it's garbage, add it to the exclude list so that we stop trying to back it up and we get status code 0 when our jobs run. On the other hand, if I take a look at it and I say, oh no, that's not garbage, that's important stuff, well, you're not protecting it. And what do I need to do in order to get it protected? Probably means I need to find a way to quiesce the application prior to the backup job. But don't get lulled into complacency. Status code ones can be very common, especially in Windows environments, and I ought to be checking up on them and seeing what I can do to get zeros instead of ones. But that much being said, do keep in mind that a status code 1 is not a failed job. Some managers will ding their backup team on this and count status code 1s as failures, and they're really not. I have protected data here. Odds are I've probably protected most of what I was trying to protect, at least in the case of a file system backup. I probably got just about everything except for a few files. So, I mean, this is a successful job. It's not a failed job. I just need to be aware that some stuff is getting missed, and I must determine if that's going to be a problem or not. Also, the comments that I'm making here are focused toward file system backups, Windows and standard policies. It's a very different story when you start talking about agents, like database agents or Microsoft Exchange or something like that. In those cases, status code 1 can be much more serious. Oftentimes, any kind of a status code 1 with an agent indicates a big problem. You get a return back, for example, you're backing up Microsoft Exchange, and that backup says, hey, I had a problem backing up the information store. I backed up the names of the mailboxes, but none of their contents. Well, thanks a lot. That's essentially, for all extents and purposes, that's more or less a useless backup. So be very careful with those status code ones with agents. And then any other status code greater than 1 will typically indicate a failure. Nothing was backed up and nothing is restorable. I have to troubleshoot to see if I can correct the problem. Now, if I'm using the checkpoint restart feature on my backup policies, which is available for file system backups, standard and Windows policies, then oftentimes instead of the job outright failing, it'll go into an incomplete state, which is represented by the little gray circle with the white horizontal line going through it, the last item on the chart here. And that means, hey, there was a problem, but if you can correct the problem, we'll pick up from the last checkpoint, which by default, the checkpoints are taken every 15 minutes. And that can save me a great deal of time, in bouncing back from an issue. Otherwise, I'd have to go all the way back to the beginning of the backup job and start again, which for very long backup jobs, wastes a lot of time. This is a very desirable feature, by the way, and I strongly recommend its use in your file system backups. Again, it's only available for standard and Windows policies, but it's very helpful and a big time saver. Remember that this incomplete state is a temporary state. The job will eventually fail. You can control how long it stays in the incomplete state in the master server host properties. By default, it's only going to be a few hours, but that is enough time for someone to get in and figure out what the problem is and hopefully correct it and resume the job rather than having to run the whole thing over again. The job that's in the suspended state, that is what looks like the little pause button, the gray circle with the two white vertical lines through it. This is a deliberate action that someone has taken. That policy has checkpoint restart enabled. Somebody right-clicked on the job and said, I want to suspend this job. And usually when we do this, it's to free up resources. Maybe I've got a high priority restore job that needs to run. And so instead of canceling a backup job to free up a tape drive, I'm going to just suspend it, run my restore, and then when the restore is done, I'll resume, where we left off. This status code that's listed on the slide here, the 157, this is not an exit code. It's just a note that you'll see in the activity monitor that this job was suspended manually. Jobs that are suspended will remain in a suspended state until action is taken, until you either resume the job or you decide, it's been too much time, I don't want to resume it, and you just flat out cancel it. Here's a close-up of the troubleshooter that's available from the activity monitor that we were discussing previously. Again, this looks up the exit code in NetBackup's help system, gives me an idea of what caused the problem, and some suggested workarounds. And this kind of varies a lot from code to code. Some status codes will give you rich, detailed information here, and they really will kind of steer you right towards the most probable cause. Some status codes can be much more general and just kind of say it didn't work, but it's always worth looking here and collecting this information. And as the slide mentions, this information is also available in the NetBackup Status Code Reference Guide, downloadable from our support page. It's also accessible from the command line using a form of the BP error command, and that might be a cute thing to do if you're writing your own scripts to notify you when you have failed jobs. You can include the reason for the failure, as well as just a statement that it didn't work. In addition to the activity monitor, I can also go to the reports section of the NetBackup admin console. There are a number of predefined reports here that I can run that will give me additional information that can be helpful about troubleshooting. The example on the slide shows a status of backups report, which is a backup history, and I don't have nearly as much detail in this report as I do in the activity monitor, but the key thing about this particular report is that my history is longer. This information sticks around for as long as I'm keeping log files in NetBackup, which is 28 days by default, as opposed to the activity monitor, which defaults to the past 72 hours. OpCenter can also be a very valuable troubleshooting tool. OpCenter, as you may know, is the web-based reporting tool for NetBackup. It's an optional component. Not every environment will be using it, but if you are using it, there are reports that you can run that'll collect detailed information about NetBackup activity that might be helpful in troubleshooting. There are reports that you can use that might help you catch problems that aren't necessarily represented by error codes. For example, jobs that run too long or run too short can be caught by App Center reports. Jobs can be organized by client. There are coverage reports that you can run from here. So, for example, a pickup trends where, hey, have you noticed that a particular client has got about a 50% job success rate, whereas everybody else is in the high 90s? They can help steer me towards trends or problems in my environment that I might not otherwise notice. And then in addition to the reporting, there are also alerts that can be configured from here, where I can get either email or SNMP notification when I have problems in NetBackup. And these can be job-specific things, such as a high job failure rate, could be the failure of a critical job, like a catalog backup, or it could be some kind of NetBackup issue, like services going down or tape drives going down. The NetBackup Administration Console has the ability to send out email notifications. This functionality is perhaps a little less commonly used nowadays because we do have OpCenter, and environments that use OpCenter will probably want to use the richer functionality that's available in that interface. But it's still present in the admin console. It may be particularly useful if I'm not using OpCenter in my environment. And so I can have NetBackup send out email notification for failed jobs. This is configured in the master server host properties under global attributes, or alternatively, as you see on the slide, it could be done from the command line as well. Note that in order for the admin console to send out email, an email method must be present. In Unix or Linux, we'll just use sendmail. There's usually no additional configuration needed. In Windows, we'll need to have an SMTP tool, such as BLAT, that will run from the command line, and that has been configured by editing the nbmail.cmd script, a process which is detailed in the NetBackup administration guide. In addition to the administration console, there are other utilities that are provided with NetBackup that can be useful for gathering information to troubleshoot a problem. Many of these are command line tools that are located in the support directory, such as NBSU, NBCP logs, and NBCC. Those are discussed in detail in the semantic tech article referenced on the slide. There's also the NetBackup Logging Assistant, which we'll discuss later in this course, which can be used from the admin console to easily set up, collect, and upload log files. Here's a closer look at the NetBackup Logging Assistant. You see it's the last node at the bottom of the tree on the left-hand side in the admin console. And this is a wizard-driven interface where I can go through and create Logging Assistant records. And each Logging Assistant record is associated with a particular incident. Usually there's a one-to-one relationship between a Logging Assistant record and a support case that I have opened up with Veritas Support. And the wizard can do a number of things for me. It can enable debug logs for me. It can walk me through the process of collecting those debug logs. It can automatically upload data to Veritas support. And so particularly where you may be responsible for an environment where you have operators working on site that may not have had as much training as the senior net backup administrative staff has, this is an easy tool to go through and activate logs and collect logs without needing to know a lot of detail about it. You don't need to know a lot about net backup logging to use this tool. You need to know practically nothing about it, actually. Again, it's an all a wizard-driven interface, and it's an easy way to get logs to Veritas support. Here's a look at a couple of the command line utilities that are provided to collect information from NetBackup. The NetBackup Support Utility, NBSU, is extremely useful for collecting information about hosts, networks, and your overall NetBackup environment. And NBSU is sort of a wrapper script that's going to kick off a number of OS commands and NetBackup commands to reach out and probe your environment. And what it's looking for are problems in your environment that may be affecting NetBackup. And so again, this is one of those situations where my net backup settings may be okay, but my name resolution or my network configuration or my host file or maybe one of my net backup files like bp.conf, something is causing issues, and the end result of that is I'm having problems with backups. This is information that's frequently requested by our support team to help in troubleshooting issues. It's a command line that's located in the NetBackup support directory, and there's a number of different modes that it can be run in to collect different types of information. Here we see the location of NBSU on a Unix or Windows NetBackup server and some of the options that are available. The default would be the -C, which is looking for NetBackup configuration related commands, although there are other ways of running it. Notice that the -L switch will list different options that are available that I can choose from at the time I run it. Notice that there are also ways of filtering the output. So for example, I can filter by a specific command. I can filter to skip a particular command. I can filter based on an exit code. That's a particularly cute way of using this tool. Say, hey, what I'm getting here is a status code 41. I know it's a communications related problem. I want to see if there's something that's misconfigured in my environment that might be causing it. And that'll automatically cause NBSU to collect information that has been known in the past to be very helpful in troubleshooting status code 41. Now let's say I've gone through and collected as much information as I can from the admin console and from the other support utilities that are provided with NetBackup. Maybe I've looked at a couple of OS commands and OS reports too, and I'm still not sure exactly what's causing this. The detailed debug logs are available within NetBackup to provide really in-depth information that can be helpful for troubleshooting. Now, debug logs are very detailed, and they're usually not the first thing that we reach for. Again, I'll look for the low-hanging fruit first, the details in the activity monitor and the troubleshooter. Try to get as much information as I can that way before I start digging around in the logs. But that much being said, because they collect so much information, sometimes they're where we have to go to get the definitive answer to what the problem is. And when I say we, that might be myself as a NetBackup administrator doing this troubleshooting, or it might be the Veritas support team. Oftentimes, when you open a support case about an issue with NetBackup, one of the first things that they'll be looking for are the relevant debug logs. Now, we'll be talking about debug logs in quite a bit of detail later in this course in the debug logging lesson. For now, we'll just mention that they come in two basic types. Legacy logs, which are associated with older NetBackup processes and daemons, and unified logs, which are associated with newer processes and which have more management tools available for them. Lots more detail about this to come. In addition to the information we collect from NetBackup, there's other points of collection on the server itself. The operating system will typically have system logs that I can consult for information. I also want to document as much information as possible about the system itself, what version it's running, what patches have been applied, what other applications might be running. I also want to take a look at other functions on the server, in particular permissions or security software or security settings that may be present, which might also be interfering with NetBackup. And then outside the client system itself, when it comes to hardware devices, there are oftentimes vendor-provided tools to get a status report, for example, on tape drives, to see that they're functioning properly and to collect information such as the firmware level that they're running. Same thing with networking. As we'll see in the troubleshooting communications problems lesson, there's a wealth of tools that is available to be able to collect information about networking configuration and to look for possible issues. In this last topic, we'll cover some additional troubleshooting resources. The full set of NetBackup documentation is downloadable from the NetBackup support site or from SORT. The two documents mentioned here, which are particularly relevant to our conversations about troubleshooting, the NetBackup Troubleshooting Guide, which contains detailed information about the troubleshooting process and other reference information that's useful when troubleshooting NetBackup, and the status code reference guide, which is literally just a list of exit codes in NetBackup and exactly what they mean and some suggested workarounds. In older versions of NetBackup, the status codes used to be listed in the troubleshooting guide. For some time now, they've been separated into two different documents. The NetBackup support site is a wealth of information about NetBackup. I can come here to download guides and to download patches. I can also search available tech notes about a particular issue that I'm having or a particular exit code that I'm getting and get detailed information about it. Another very valuable online resource is SORT, the Semantic Operations Readiness Tools for NetBackup. And this is primarily geared at the upgrade process or the initial installation of NetBackup. A lot of the information I can get from here is checklists for installation of NetBackup, links to the actual software itself, links to compatibility guides, which I should be checking before I begin the installation or upgrade process. And of course, there's information here that's useful to me after I have installed the product as well, such as links to the NetBackup support pages and to white pages and to the NetBackup forums. The NetBackup customer forums are where I can talk to other folks using NetBackup, which again is a strong troubleshooting resource that you should be drawing upon when appropriate. Remember, you are not alone out there. There are many, many folks that are using NetBackup besides you, and that can be very helpful when I encounter a particular problem. Maybe it's something that somebody else has seen before and can help me out with. Sort also exists as a mobile application for smartphones that can be used to get up-to-date information about error codes, patches, and installation and upgrade checklists. Note that both Sort Mobile and the Sort website are designed for use with NetBackup and with the InfoScale line of products from Veritas. So you'll see information about both NetBackup and InfoScale in Sort and Sort Mobile. Semantic Connect is another potentially valuable resource, a web-based resource for us. Connect is designed to bring NetBackup users together. So the NetBackup forums are hosted here. Again, if you're not already a member of the forum, I encourage you to do so. A lot of great information is exchanged here. It's one of the biggest benefits we have working with NetBackup, not just the quality of the product, but also the fact that there is a huge installed customer base. Lots of folks using NetBackup, a big resource that we can draw upon for more information or to help us out with troubleshooting. And then that's not the only thing on Semantic Connect. There's other information available here as well, such as information about new features in new versions of NetBackup, white papers that I can download, videos that I can watch. Connect does tend to be sort of feature-centric. It's not designed so much specifically for troubleshooting the way the NetBackup support site is. It's kind of more designed like, everything is working okay, but here's this new feature, and if you'd like to learn more about how it works, here's a lot of information about it. That can particularly be helpful if I suspect that configuration might be part of what's causing my jobs to fail. Maybe I just don't understand the feature I'm trying to use correctly. In this lesson, you learned how to identify situations that require troubleshooting, and you learned about the standard troubleshooting methodology for NetBackup and how to take an ordered approach to troubleshooting. We talked about key points to gather information from NetBackup and some NetBackup utilities that are provided to help us out with troubleshooting. And we also took a look at some other sources outside of NetBackup that can be useful for information collecting.